think everyone's here, so I will call the this meeting of the Boston Region MPO UPWP Committee meeting to order. And I'll start with the notice of non-discrimination here on the screen. You are invited to participate in our transportation planning process, regardless of your race, color, national origin, including limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, ancestry, ethnicity, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, veteran status, or background. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Excuse me. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 Level AA standards and revised Section 508 standards. If you require any additional accommodations in order to participate fully in this meeting, or if you have any technical difficulties, please contact Lauren McGee, MPO staff at lmagee@ctps.org or 857-702-3706 or via the chat box. All participants will join the meeting with muted microphones. Please rename yourself to include your first name, last name, and affiliation. After roll call, board members may mute and unmute themselves. Always remain muted unless actively speaking. To participate in the discussion, please use the raise hand function. You can find this by clicking either on the participants button at the bottom of the screen, and a window will pop up with a raise hand button at the bottom, or the reactions button in the toolbar. The chair will then call on participants. If you're on the phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand. Right. And with that, Lauren, could you please call the roll?
Of course. Mastot.
Chris Clem Mastot here.
City of Newton.
Hello again, everyone. David Kozis from Newton.
Inner Core Committee, City of Somerville.
Good afternoon, Tom Bent, City of Somerville.
Metro West Regional Collaborative, City of Framingham. Metropolitan Area Planning Council. MBTA Advisory Board.
Good afternoon, Hannah Swilikowski, MBTA Advisory Board.
Okay. Regional Transportation Advisory Council.
Larry Diggins, RTAC here.
Three Rivers Interlocal Council, Town of Norwood.
Tom O'Rourke from the town of Norwood, representing the Trick subregion. And if it's okay with the chair, Steve Olenoff is on as well. And I missed the last couple of meetings. He was more involved in this process than I've been, so I'd be willing to let him have the chair today, and I would serve as the alternate, if that's okay.
That's fine with me. Thanks, Tom.
Yep.
City of Boston.
Good afternoon, Jen Rowe, City of Boston.
And Southwest Advisory Planning Committee, Town of Rentham.
Rachel Benson here for SWAP.
Great, that's the roll.
Awesome. Thanks, Lauren. And good to see everybody online today. With that, we'll move on to agenda item 2, public comments. Are there any members of the public who would like to provide a comment to the committee this afternoon? Geez. Not seeing any raised hands. I'll note that if anyone has any written comments, they can provide a copy of that to staff by emailing Olivia at osaccocia@ctps.org. All right, and we will move on to our main agenda item today. It's the discussion of the 2026 UPWP discrete study scenarios. Olivia will present the 4 discrete study scenarios, followed by a discussion and a vote to approve the studies that we will include in the FFY 2026 UPWP. Whenever you're ready, Olivia.
Awesome, thank you. So we can move one slide ahead, please. Thanks. So at our meeting 2 weeks ago, we discussed 7 discrete study ideas that we thought were best aligned with the MPO's goals and objectives, our agency priorities, our available resources, and our staff availability. And based on your feedback, we have eliminated one study for further consideration. That one is M5, Guidance for Implementing Crash Response Processes based on some of the challenges that we talked about and discussed 2 weeks ago. We've also taken your feedback and refined a few of the other study ideas, which I will briefly explain shortly. And so today, using the remaining 6 studies, we've proposed 4 different programming scenarios that fit within our budget constraint of $150,000. And you may have noticed that all 4 of these scenarios include P9, the roadway pricing stakeholder analysis and communications study. Since this committee and the board have shown interest in the MPO continuing work in this area, it aligns well with our agency priorities, and yet it doesn't quite fit into an existing program. So that's why we have put it in all 4 scenarios today. So first, like I said, I'll just highlight the changes we made to 2 study descriptions based on your feedback. And then I'll walk through each scenario briefly. After, we'll have a discussion and ultimately a vote to approve the studies that will be funded in FFY 2026. So if there are no questions, we can move on to the next slide.
Any questions for Olivia before she goes on? Keep going, Olivia. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. So I'll talk just briefly about M4, multimodal bottleneck detection for the region. We've ultimately clarified that the primary goal of this study will be to locate areas in our region that are multimodal bottleneck areas or areas that experience heavy traffic for multiple modes of transportation. We've also clarified that this study will proactively identify and address safety risks, specifically for vulnerable road users, by providing guidance and recommendations for safety improvements within these multimodal bottleneck areas. And lastly, we've also added how this study will inform other MPO work. Specifically, the findings of this study will be able to help us score TIP projects by providing additional data-driven insights into the existing TIP scoring criteria, such as the safety, community accessibility, and multimodal mobility accessibility criteria. So we can move on to the next slide, please. And I'll also just briefly talk about E1 representing the experience of limited mobility individuals. And for this study, we've clarified in a bit more detail the outcome of this study and also how this study can be scaled down, because in our scenarios today, this study is priced at $50,000. And given that scale, the outcome of this study will be a technical memo, which will identify key variables, data gaps, and potential analysis strategies that will enable MPO staff to better analyze the quality of destination access for individuals with limited mobility within various aspects of our planning work. But we've also added some additional outcomes to this study that we could explore in the future. So for example, this study could eventually lead to the development of a mobility metric that could help us prioritize our planning work. And for example, that could be used in the TIP scoring process. It could also inform our bicycle and pedestrian regional plan and our coordinated public transit human services plan. And it could also lead to an analysis on where there are gaps in destination access for folks with limited mobility in our region. So that's overall what we've added or clarified based on the feedback we received from this committee. Before moving on, I can, myself or other staff on the call can answer any questions if there are any.
Thanks, Olivia. Does anyone have any questions for Olivia at this point? You can proceed to the scenarios. Thanks, Olivia.
Awesome. Yeah. So if we go to the next slide, thank you. I'll just briefly walk through the 4 scenarios. Scenario 1 includes 3 studies, each at $50,000. It includes M2, impact of transportation network company or TNC vehicles on travel time delays during peak hour. M4, multimodal bottleneck detection for the region, and P9, roadway pricing stakeholder analysis. And on the next slide, scenario 2 includes L1, impact of parking supply on property values at $70,000. M2, impact of TNC vehicles on travel time delays during peak hour. And in this scenario, it is priced at $30,000, and work related to this study would be incorporated into our congestion management process or CMP program for this scenario. And also in this scenario is P9, roadway pricing stakeholder analysis. And on the next slide, we have scenario 3, which includes E1, representing the experience of limited mobility individuals at $50,000, which is a reduced scope from when it was originally put in front of the committee, and I explained explained how that would be reduced earlier. It also includes M4, multimodal bottleneck detection for the region at $50,000, and again, P9, roadway pricing stakeholder analysis at $50,000. And on the next slide, we have the last scenario, scenario 4, which includes A1, pedestrian scale lighting for small and medium-sized communities at $50,000. L1, impact of parking supply on property values. And in this scenario, it is priced at $50,000, which is a reduced scope. And so the data exploration part of this study would be scaled down a bit. The study would essentially continue with more of a limited sample of data in this scenario. And again, P9, roadway pricing stakeholder analysis. So if we move on to the next slide, I've laid out all the scenarios on one page. And before we open it up for discussion, I wanted to make one note that, as you can tell, all of these studies really can be priced at $50,000. So if the committee is interested in another study combination in addition to the 4 that's presented here today, of course, we welcome you to discuss other scenarios if you are interested in other combinations aside from these 4 on our screen. So I will now turn it back to Chris for questions and a discussion.
Thanks so much, Olivia. Appreciate the overview, especially of the ways in which our conversation a couple weeks ago, which was really great, contributed to some changes in a couple scenarios, or excuse me, a couple studies specifically. With that, I'm happy to open it up for questions, conversation. Anyone want to show like a vocal support for one scenario over the other? Len, go ahead.
Thank you. You can tell that I'm ready to go on this one. I'm going to keep it positive, all right? So I'm going to talk about why I like scenario 3 so much, and that is, first off, the materials that I was sent that was connected to 3 were really superb, and I know that we're going to be scaling back a lot, but I have a lot of confidence in the proponent and what she can do with this study, and I think my gut sense, I should never really go on a gut, but I'll explain, my passion for it is that we will probably find some things in here that we maybe don't expect. But also, the other reason I'm passionate for it is that I think we'll learn a lot about elderly, users of our network, and the challenges that they have getting around, because they tend to be we tend to be those who are experiencing increasingly limited mobility as we get older. So that's one reason I really like to have that study done. With respect to the multimodal bottleneck detection, again, this one I think it's more exploratory, even though I think we will focus on limited possibilities to start. But also what I like about this one is that it's proactive, and so instead of waiting, for problems to materialize, we look at where there are potential for problems. And I like us moving towards doing those kinds of studies. And I think it will also pose an interesting challenge for us to do before and after studies for this. It's like, what are the metrics then for before and then after? I won't say anything about roadway pricing because, well, it's in all of them, and I'm not going to advocate taking it out because I think it has merit. Thank you. That's it.
Thanks, Len. Appreciate those comments. Had a feeling you'd like scenario 3. Next up was Julia.
Hi, thanks everyone. Julia Wellers here. Great work. It's always a hard decision. Eric and I met with Rebecca yesterday to talk about some of the studies that have particular overlap / synergy with MAPC work, namely the TNC study and the parking supply property values. So glad to see both of those in here in various iterations. I'm wondering what the difference is between parking at 70,000 and the parking study at 50, and if either of those took into account the potential of the MAPC contribution and utilizing our own UPWP and other funds that support this same universe of work.
That's a great question. Olivia and MPO staff, could you help respond to that? Rebecca, I see you just popped on screen. Go ahead.
Great. Thanks, Chris. And yeah, Julia, thanks for that question. And it was good to connect with you and Eric about these studies. So for the parking supply study, the difference between the 70 and the 50 is some of the data exploration. And so I think in talking to MAPC, as we talked about the various data sources that MAPC has, I think to some degree we're able to reduce it down to 50 if we go in partnership with MAPC. And the other piece is some of the data exploration we could even start this year, so kind of get ahead of that a bit, so we're ready to do that study. So I think we would end up with the same result. It's just a matter of, the partnership with MAPC, if MAPC is committed to advancing this in partnership, and, spending a little bit of time this year just doing some of that early exploration so that we can work on that, hit the ground kind of in October and
Totally.
complete it in that budget.
Cool. Along those lines, so what would happen if for scenario 2, the L1 went down to 50 and then you'd have 50, 30, 50? Could that extra 20 be used to bring in another study? Is that enough for any of these studies, or would it add to one of the other ones? Like, how would that pan out?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Staff, I don't know if you considered in your scenario development or in the work you've done the past few weeks, if we could support a study at just $20,000. I know that none exists currently here, but is that something that was considered at all, trimming it back even further to support a 4th study? Don't all jump at once. Just kidding.
or making another 170 although I don't see any of the other ones
Sure, yeah.
parking one.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Julia. Or raising another one back up to its original cost. I'll let that marinate with staff for a bit. But great point there, great comment. David Kozis. Oh, wait, real quick. I saw Tegan's hand and Annette's hand go up. Who would like to go first? Go ahead.
Annette, I'll let you go first. I was going to say something to get us to start reacting because our take on this might be a little bit divided. But Annette, why don't you go first?
Sure. I mean, my first comment is it's really hard for us to do anything at 20,000 that's meaningful. So I don't think adding a study at 20,000 is an option. We could discuss increasing the budget on another study, I think, but I don't think we could do a whole new study for 20,000.
Got it. Yeah, thanks for sharing that with us, Annette. David Kozis, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really glad that Len said that he liked scenario 3 because I missed the meeting where we discussed these, so I never got a chance to say that I really felt like this was sort of a fresh idea that that is something for us to study that I really don't remember anything like it being studied before. Maybe it was, but or maybe that was covered in the last meeting, but I just don't remember that. So as far as I can recall. So I agree that we might have some very interesting results with E1, and it's only in scenario 3. I mean, I like all of these, but I would go with scenario 3. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, David. Steve Olenoff.
So I'm very enthusiastic about scenario number 4. First, it has the A1 pedestrian scale lighting. So this is something that's never been done before. So right away, that's a good reason to do it. And I think it really matters. Yes, it seems to be geared towards small and medium-sized communities, because large communities, they just put in a ton of lighting because they have the density that they can do it. And I gave you a few stories last week about lighting, but I'll just say that, well, here's the way my town has done it, and I think a lot of towns have done it, is they have a small residential street or even a main street. Doesn't have any lighting at all. And some neighbor calls in and complains and says, no lighting. So they come and put a light in front of their house. Then somebody else calls and they put a light in front of their house, and it keeps on going that way. And so you end up with lighting that's uneven all over the place. And that's not the way lighting should be. It needs to be even. And it ends up being uneven because of that process. And then even when they say, okay, we'll do the entire street, but we're a little short on money. So instead of every 150, 200 feet for light, we'll put every 300 or 400 feet. And again, you get the same effect. You get light, dark, light, dark, light, dark as you go down the street, which means the light's not very effective. Because again, I think it has to be pointed out and again, the importance of lighting. And lighting works is the eye takes time to adjust. And so going from a lighted area to a dark area, we know you have a problem, but going from a dark area to a light area, you also have the same problem. Your eyes can't adjust, you can't see, you think. So putting a lot of lighting in different spots where you think you need it doesn't work. So I don't want to say how this study should turn out, that it should be a study and should come to these various conclusions. But I think the fact that there's a lot to learn here. These communities need to get this knowledge. They don't have it now. They don't know the way. I mean, it might be that you're better off not putting lights on the street rather than just putting a few here and there. So I think that's very important that we have that kind of study, which has never been done before. And again, the L1, I like the parking supply that complements what MAPC has done, that we have too many parking spaces in a lot of instances. And the pushback on that, one of the pushbacks is for more spaces is, well, the banks say you need enough parking spaces or we won't give you a mortgage, or in general, people say we need more parking spaces and will affect property values. So if this study can show that there is no correlation, that the property values are not affected by parking supply, that's something that's really useful, that really should be done, and it will really fill out what MAPC is doing. So that's why I'm for scenario number 4.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, great comments, and certainly echo a lot of the conversation we had a couple weeks ago. And to your points about lighting, so many variables that we might not consider, but it's really important for that effort to be coordinated not only within one town or community, but also inter-communities. Thinking about where I live, I walk to my neighboring cities all the time. Jen Rowe, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. This is a great conversation. I definitely appreciate how much things have evolved also since last week and everything we said then. I think I will also kind of lend my support to scenario 3, was the one I was favoring as well. I think the key pieces here for me are the novelty, as was mentioned for about E1, and also I think both of these, especially now after M4 was clarified, like have really clear lines of connection to how the results of them can be used by the MPO. So I really look, it makes me feel like there'd be something we could immediately do with this. I think that said, I think all of these studies would be fascinating, and I'd like to see them kind of come back anything that we're not choosing this time around. And perhaps I think a few things that could make me feel like, for example, the parking supply, I think would be fascinating. I think I would really want to make sure that we have start building or like relationships with some of the financial institutions or something, so that we kind of know what it is that would like kind of influence their thinking on this. So I think there may be a few places where some of these studies, maybe that's part of what happens over the course of a study. But that's, I guess, my thinking at the moment. And thanks so much to staff for kind of being so responsive and preparing these scenarios.
Thanks, Jen. Yeah, certainly agree and echo your thanks to staff about sort of developing those connections to some of the work products here and how they play into other MPO work, how they participate and contribute to MPO practices, thinking about M4, the multimodal bottleneck detection study, and contribution to TIP project prioritization, just being in the thick of that last few months, and you would just strengthen that process for the MPO and the TIPper committee as well, would certainly be a benefit. David Kozis.
Thank you. It's the same problem as usual. We just have too many good ideas every year. But I do agree with Steve as well. I think lighting the A1 would be very valuable, and it's new as well. It's something I have worked on lighting in the past. So I guess there's no reason why we can't recombine these into a different scenario, and have E1 and A1. And another one like P9, I suppose, if that would be an option that we could consider. Thanks. As far as, I don't know, with bottlenecks, I do feel like another good project, but it seems like, and I missed the discussion where we talked more about this, but it does feel like that's something that we've sort of covered in some way in the past. This might be different, but some of the other ideas seem very new to me. So thanks.
Yeah, thanks, David. And if I recall from what Olivia said, I think MPO staff would definitely entertain a new scenario based on the conversation here. So we can follow up shortly. Len, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So first off, I wanted to kind of ratchet down my passion, so I get excited sometimes, and we shouldn't make any decisions, not that I think you all would, because Len is passionate or because Len likes something, so decisions should be dispassionate, and I tend to be very enthusiastic about things that I like, but things I don't like, I can be kind of measured about them, but I like all these studies, and if we pick any scenario that we find kind of like where David's headed with the A1 E1, as I said, with M4, I do like the proactive nature of it, but I'll even propose something radical, and that is A1, E1, and M4. If we're really thinking about new scenarios, because even though I like work rate pricing and stakeholder analysis, I think it's something that we can develop, anyways, and if maybe there's anything that we could even entertain the notion of doing for less money, it would be it. Not that there's going to be any money left over if we were to do A1, E1, M4, but once again, any of these, any combinations, I'm going to be enthusiastic about, but not too passionate. Thank you.
Thanks, Len. Appreciate the enthusiasm there. And
Sure.
before I move on to Steve Olenoff, question for staff about P9, the roadway pricing stakeholder analysis. I believe in the discrete study scenario list, it mentions that this would build off of the FY 2025 study. So is the expectation here that you'd like to kind of continue building on the momentum that you've established this year and into this study next year? Can you provide any more context for that? Apologies, I don't have the notes right in front of me. Annette, go ahead.
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity to clarify here. So yes, it would build on the existing study, but the other component of it is the issue about communications and how to effectively communicate roadway pricing. And so that ties into the stakeholder analysis. Who do you communicate with and how when you're starting to implement some of these policies?
Yeah, thanks, Annette. And General, I know your name is on this study, so if it's related to this, I'll let you go ahead and speak as well.
Well, it's okay. Others can, yeah.
You sure?
Yeah.
Just one more comment on this. Again, I know this came up a couple weeks ago as well, but just with sort of the timing of roadway pricing and congestion pricing in New York City, just sort of the conversation nationally on this topic. Perhaps there is some, provides more support for us to keep this going and not potentially wait 2 years down the road where, perhaps it loses steam or anything else might happen. Those are my final thoughts on the subject. Steve Olenoff, thanks for waiting. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I do like scenario 4, but having A1, E1, and P9 is would be my second choice. So my question on M4, and I guess I have to go a little bit negative on M4, but are you looking at finding specific bottlenecks, or is that general on how to find bottlenecks? Because sometimes it's like some of these studies are sort of obvious, like where's the bottleneck? Well, when you see traffic backing up, that's where there's a bottleneck. And how much is there to study? I think we know what causes bottlenecks and where they're going to happen. Is this study going to find just 1 or 2 particular ones in the whole region, or how is it generalized throughout the entire region?
Yeah, sure. Those are great questions, Steve. Can anyone from staff respond to some of those questions? Rebecca Morgan, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. And I believe Dorcas Okaija, who proposed this idea, is also here. And so if she's here, I'd ask her to raise her hand. She can chime in a bit more. But the idea is to use these regional data sets, some of which have already been developed or are in development as part of our grant called the No Heat Project, and understanding where people are currently traveling and the level of travel that's happening at a multimodal level, and then identifying regionally where are the highest, more complex points where there's bottlenecks, where people taking transit, people biking, people walking, people driving are kind of interfering with one another. And so just getting a sense for priority in terms of where we're seeing that mainly is the idea, with a focus on vulnerable roadway users.
Yeah, so I'd rather have studies that do something overall for the whole region rather than say, okay, here's a problem here, identifying a problem there, because that's only helping and concerned with those 1 or 2 spots. So that's why I would say just instead of M4, we have A1, so we have A1, E1, and P9. I think that's would be a good way to do it.
Yeah, appreciate those comments, Steve, and thanks for sharing your insights on that, Rebecca. Seems like there's getting some momentum for an E1, A1, P9. But Chenro, go ahead.
I have a question about A1.
Oh, apologies if I froze.
Okay. For A1, I guess one of my reservations about it was kind of a not, as I was mentioning earlier, kind of connection to the MPO's role. Is anyone able to, I guess, answer from last week whether pedestrian scale lighting is something the MPO could create a program around in terms of community connections, or if anyone else could speak to kind of the way that I know we can put out a resource and others can can read and view it, but I feel like there's a lot of something might get more distribution if there was also a way that we're using it in our work and funding and encouraging people to be building this type of infrastructure.
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Jen. And I cut out briefly there, but can anyone from staff sort of respond to Jen's comments? What else beyond? Rebecca, please go ahead.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And I like the community connections idea. I don't think that's something that we've talked about, but if we do move forward with this idea, I think it's something to certainly consider. I think the way that we were thinking about this is developing this resource, and then that would be then available to any community that's looking to do this. But then also we would bring that into our technical assistance projects and our intersection corridor projects, and making sure that we're following those practices consistently across. So we would use it as staff for technical assistance and make it available for communities to do that independent of us. But it looks like Annette is raising her hand, maybe on the community connections. I think it's an interesting idea, but it's not something that we've talked about.
Thanks, Rebecca. Annette, care to add anything to that?
Sure. For community connections, that's funded with CMAQ funds, and so it needs to prove air quality improvements, and I don't think that that would qualify. We could consider it as an item under our Complete Streets program, like adding that into our evaluation criteria, but we're trying to hold off on revising our evaluation criteria until the next LRTP.
Got it. Thank you, Annette. And Ethan Lapointe, I'll let you add anything else if you'd like.
We can't hear you, Ethan.
I lost him. Does anybody see him?
I can see him.
Got me?
There you go.
I can hear you now.
Okay, you can hear me now.
Yeah.
Apologies for that. I was mostly going to say, just to double down on what Annette said, all correct there with the CMAQ funding. We do provide other sources of funding for community connections as well, but regardless, because it is all federal funding, especially with anything with lighting, anything that interacts with the sidewalk or would require any kind of modification or access to right-of-way or utilities work, would also require a full-blown project initiation review process with MassDOT from the highway section. So it is fairly incongruent with the community connections program, at least as currently established. What Annette mentioned about the Complete Streets program is accurate because it would need a much longer design and development timeline. It's the joys of federal funding.
Got it. Yeah, thanks, Ethan. That was sort of something that trickled in the back of my mind, like potential coordination needs with utilities, whoever owns the right of way, MassDOT, et cetera. I guess my concern or desire from a product out of here being a guidebook or something beyond that is that something is achievable for towns to actually implement, lighting at this scale. Steve Olenoff, I think you were next.
Yeah. So on this, every time we have a roadway construction project that comes up, no one ever mentions street lighting. Now, Ethan, on projects like this, is street lighting included so that the federal money pays for the increased street lighting on any of these projects, or is that something just left to the towns?
I wouldn't say it never comes up, but Ethan, if you have any insights, feel free to share them.
Yeah, there are projects that incorporate lighting plans into their development, especially on more dedicated trail projects, though I will note there's a multitude of components that go into projects that applicants often just try to focus on the core inputs of the project. We would generally classify things like lighting or wayfinding signage that are usually smaller budget line items as like appurtenances. Don't usually get the most screen time, but still a valuable part of the project. So the short answer is yes, they are in there. Long answer is they just often don't ascend to the level of notoriety as the more cost-intensive components may.
Yeah, so I think that it's overlooked, and I think a study like this would bring it to attention that you need to consider proper lighting when you're doing these reconstruction, especially if you want a complete street to be a complete street, you need good lighting. So that's why I'm in favor of this one. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Tom Benton, go ahead.
Thank you, Chris. No, on A1, just a couple of comments on the lighting. It's part of this is my business, so I know it well. And there's a lot of guidelines out there for lighting for streets. I know MassDOT has their guidelines. I just Googled, City of Boston has that, but I also recognize it's probably different in inner core communities and then communities that are outside the inner core. It's two different beasts kind of. The other thing about this study that's interesting, they're not just looking at the roadway, they're looking at how it's basically sidewalk lighting too, because a lot of the lighting, street lighting, is more the way the light throws, it's more out into the street. So I was mixed on this because I thought there's a ton of information out there on how to design roadway lighting. There's a lot of guidelines and things like that. So I wasn't sure at the end of the day, what the study would achieve. I know it mentions that the town of Brookline's looking into pedestrian friendly lighting. in response to this issue. So it'd be kind of interesting to see what they come up with. So I've been kind of back and forth on this one, but that's why I was waiting. I was listening to what everyone had to say. So it was kind of, it was convincing me to be in favor of it. And I was going to ask the question, Chris, that you did about P9. My concern there is if the federal government is going to do what they just did to New York and say, well, if you do this, we're not going to fund you. Are we chasing, are we spending money that the feds are going to come back and say, not now, so I don't know if that's been part of the conversation at all. But overall, depending on what staff says about P9, I'd be fine with a hybrid, scenario of like A1, E1, and P9. But like others have said, all these are good studies. The bottleneck one, M4, I feel like we've done this before, and so it'd be kind of interesting to do some things that we haven't done before. That's it. Thanks.
Thanks for those comments, Tom. Annette, would you like to respond?
Thank you. Yes, Tom, are you talking about funding for this particular study or funding for roadway pricing in general?
It'd be funding for roadway pricing in general.
Yeah, okay, so I think my answer to that is this isn't something that's going to happen probably within the next 4 years, that we would actually have a project. These things take a really long time. I can't remember how long New York has been working on this, but it's definitely more than 10 years.
Yeah.
And so there's all this initial work that needs to be done, I think, to prepare for putting a proposal out there for roadway pricing. And so that's the idea behind this study, is how do we start preparing for if we were to propose some form of roadway pricing.
And that's a great point. Like you said, it's going to take, some time to do this. And I was following what was going on in New York, and I know the disappointment that we saw when, after all their work, and I think they were all ready to implement it. And then they got, it's been held up again. But no, that's a great response. Thank you.
Thanks, Annette. Thanks, Tom. Chenra.
Just adding on to that conversation that, like in my mind, that kind of is one of the reasons maybe to potentially work on something like this, is so that we might be, poised to have something, who knows, maybe implementable 4 years from now, given how long things like this take to come together. And yeah, I do think I appreciate what staff have done to kind of like make sure the wording and such is not like triggering anything at a that we wouldn't want it to. That's it.
Yeah, and to kind of piggyback on your comments of words that might trigger like review. I don't remember if this was a comment from someone else a couple weeks ago or me, but just I know this is building off the FY25 roadway pricing study, but just the phrase roadway pricing. I don't recall if Anthony Jones from FHWA provided any comment or feedback to that a couple weeks ago, but I think Julia or someone else suggested like roadway demand management as a way to sort of maintain the work there, just to shift the title to something that's a little more palatable for.
Yes, that was me. Good
Oh,
memory.
awesome. God, I wanted to credit you. But
Demand
yeah.
management.
Yeah, that's just sort of final note I have on that one. Annette, do you have any response to that?
Yeah, I'll just go back and say that is something actually that the current administration has in their policies. Like, they're not adverse to roadway pricing. I think it's just what the focus of the roadway pricing is for, and that it doesn't be used to fund transit. And I think they have a particular issue with New York.
Or like climate change, all of those words, which.
Yeah. All right, reassuring. Thank you for that, Annette. Len Diggins, thanks for.
Yeah. Well, people who want to be triggered and be triggered, just be careful. We might have to take trans out of transit, and then what are we gonna do? So anyways, look, I mean, just to correct Tom on one thing, and someone actually had corrected me, or at least informed me. I mean, so New York has gone through with its roadway pricing, its congestion pricing, and I was made aware, that they do have a mechanism to allow people, with limited income, well, they've taken the regression element out of it, or at least reduced it. So I'm happy to hear that. What makes me inclined to support P9 is when we discussed it last time, and we discussed that it might be even a broader context means, so that it's like we can maybe explore, transportation network access pricing, which could then, fit in, not only for the Boston region, but also beyond when it comes to how we just fund our entire transportation network. So that would be a reason for wanting to see it stay. But the reason I suggested maybe taking it out was to be able to give us, A1, E1, and M4, and I don't think the bottleneck detection, has been done in the way this study would do it, and I think it'd be more of it would be more generalized, in that it would be applied to the entire region. Yes, you may find problems, in one area versus another area. But I guess the question I have regarding the pedestrian scale lighting, and I can easily support this, is why is it limited to small and medium-sized communities? Wouldn't it also have applicability, in large communities?
It's a great question. Staff, any particular reason why we're focusing on small, medium-sized communities here? Rebecca, go ahead.
I just wanted to see if Seth Asante is on. I don't know if he's maybe not able to raise his hand, but he was the one that proposed this. It looks like he's on, so I don't know if someone can maybe unmute him if he's not able to do that.
Seth, if you're with us, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yeah, he should be able to unmute. Everyone can.
Okay,
Yeah,
excellent.
I think some of the large cities already have guidelines for street lighting. It's the small and medium-sized communities that most of the communities don't have guidance on pedestrian scale lighting. But I also agree, maybe this will be also useful to some of the larger communities. So maybe we should look at it regionally for the MPO.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that insight there. How are you distinguishing between large versus small versus medium? Is it in terms of population?
We haven't come out with that criteria yet, but if this study is approved to move forward, we may design a selection criteria, and that will come up in the work scope. So I think that will be some of the area that we need to focus to develop a criteria to do the selection.
Okay, understood. Thank you. And to your earlier point, certainly don't want to sort of duplicate any existing efforts for guidance that might already be out there for large cities. David Kozis, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I raised my hand at exactly the right time because, at least 10 or 15 times, I can say I've gotten a call from a resident that calls up and says, why can't Newton have the same lighting that you have in Waltham, when you leave Newton and you get to Moody Street. So, we hear about this a lot. We're not a small community. We talk about, we're now getting rid of our gas lamps. We talk about what's the best street lamps to buy as part of a major reconstruction project on a corridor. So I like this project. I don't think we have guidelines as far as I know as a city. And, so I don't necessarily think it needs to be limited to small communities or medium size. Thanks.
Thanks for those comments. Jenna.
Clarifying question. My understanding was that this would be sort of a guidebook, which seems like it could have applicability broadly, but Seth was talking a little bit about like selecting small or large communities. Would that be like maybe if there were a follow-up to this, but this effort itself is more just a guidebook? Speak to that.
Staff, can anyone respond to Jen? Apologies, my audio cut out for half your comment. Seth?
Yeah, I think from the comments that I'm hearing, I think it would be a good idea to look at it for the MPO region and not to maybe originally I thought maybe small size and medium-sized communities will be where it will be really needed. But from the comments I'm hearing, some of the cities that we have, the guide will also be very helpful for them. So I think it will be a revision that maybe we need to make.
Okay, thanks, Seth. Rebecca, care to add on?
Yeah, I just want to, I agree with what Seth is saying. I think the idea here, Jen, is to develop a guidebook which could have multiple applications, and it's not necessarily have to be limited to the size of a community. I think it was more around like the case studies that we might look at, but I think we can expand that to include communities in the inner core and larger ones. Maybe one of the case studies that we look at would include that. But it is a guidebook, so it's not looking at specific locations, but rather providing guidance for the region. So can certainly add a larger city to that in terms of the case study.
Thanks, Rebecca. Tom, Ben.
Just something on the lighting. The other thing too is I know some cities and towns, the local, the utility company, whether it's Eversource or National Grid or whatever, owns the poles that the lights go on, and they, maintain them. I know in Somerville, we've changed that where we maintain them now. But just as a thing to thinking about, one of the things that are starting to come up is the request for vehicle charges on streets, especially, in the inner core. I've seen that in the past, where what they're doing is they're working with the utility companies to put charging units on utility poles. So I don't know if that, again, it's not part of the lighting issue, but it's another issue that we're starting to see. I believe Boston and some other cities have, they're doing like pilot test sites for vehicle charges, being fed from the utility poles. So again, it's just another piece of the puzzle with the lighting, because it's all interconnected. So it's just something to think about. But I'll just reiterate, there are a lot of guidelines out there. So I don't think it would be difficult for staff to look at what in this all these different illumination society and things like that have recommendations for roadway parking lot lighting and things like that. And then I wanted to thank Len for correcting me. What I've been reading in New York is that the Trump administration is definitely threatened to pull, millions of dollars in federal funding and I guess there was a deadline of March 21st, and then they've extended it out until April sometime. So I probably got a little confused on that, but I think they're under threat of losing federal funding, and that was kind of my point, but again, and that, relieve me on that. Like you said, it's going to take a while to even come up with a plan on that. So hopefully we won't be dealing with this in 4 years.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. And, I'm sure everyone here is going to be closely following that as it develops for the next couple months, or possibly even this month. Len, go ahead.
Yeah, as I said, they're going to threaten to take our funding if we don't take trans out of transit because they're anti-trans. But there's that, and also, I'm hoping too, that because New York has led the way, that it won't take me another 10 or 20 years, for us to get there. And this study could hopefully facilitate that. But Tom, what you said about the attaching charging stations to the light poles, I'm very excited about that. I know I'm going out of scope a little bit, but maybe I can pull it back in by saying, like, one of my hopes is that, especially for Arlington, is that we can move more towards shared vehicles, shared EVs, and that will reduce the need for parking, because I think the way to get at reducing the demand for parking, getting developers on board with that, is not for us to kind of come down from it saying, like, we're not going to give you the parking, so you need to figure out some alternative. It's like to take away the desire for people to own their own vehicle, and if you can make it such that they can share vehicles, we can do, like, the charging on the street and make that easier for people. It's just great. So that's all. Thanks for that, Tom.
Yeah. Thanks, Len. Certainly a good topic that will be discussed for years moving forward, but certainly worthy of a large study in and of itself. We've had a lot of conversation. It's all been great, mainly focusing on scenarios 3 and 4. I know we still have some time left. I don't recall if the meeting end time was posted as 3:15 or 3:30, but I do want to just ask if anyone wants to discuss any of the other studies. I don't think we've really talked about M2 at all, the impact of TNC vehicles on travel time during peak hour. And we only briefly mentioned L1, the impact of parking supply on property value. So any desire from the group here to dig into those a little bit more?
On the L1, I know we talked about this a little last time in the study that was previously done. The feedback I got from, a lot of the buildings that have been built recently here is they're still empty. So it's hard for them, a survey went out and it was hard for them to answer a lot of the questions on that survey. On the parking supplies and how that would affect property values. I think it's a good question, because when I do talk to developers and people that own these buildings, it's the financiers that are still driving, the parking, requirements on their end of what they want to see for an office or a lab building being built. So, but a lot of the feedback I got was, we're not really sure yet, because, a lot of these new buildings that have been built are empty right now, and, they're having trouble trying to figure out what's going to happen. So I think that's why it's been kind of like, they were having trouble answering the survey questions a while back.
Yeah, that's a good point. I do recall that conversation, Tom. Rose McCarron, would you care to respond at all?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify for this study, we did have a lot of trouble collecting data for the lab and municipal parking study. And so we were thinking about that as we developed the approach for this. We would work with a data set of real estate transaction sales. So buildings that are established and have changed hands, and look at the amount of parking supply to see how that impacted the sale price. And so, we won't have to go out and do observations or look at occupancy or get to some of those details that are a little bit harder to get to. It would be like already established buildings, and if they weren't able to be leased up, they would probably have a lower price, and so that's the thing we're trying to get at there.
Okay. Yeah, but appreciate that response. I think the study did note that you would try to control a lot of the variables that influence property values. But do want to sort of agree with Tom in a sense that it's been a kind of crazy 5-6 years. So I'll leave it at that. But thank you, Rose. Len Diggins, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, me. I was looking to see if Marty was in the room to speak to M2, because I see it's tightly linked with M1, and I know there's the ability to do exploratory modeling in TDM 23, and I have not delved into as much as I have wanted to. I will get to it, So I was just wondering to what extent that maybe we could get some insights, into this just by doing some modeling. I know I shouldn't say just by doing, but maybe modeling, could give us some insights that we would get even if we don't do the study. So that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And I thought I saw Priyanka, who's one of the other staff persons that helped describe this study on the call. Priyanka, are you here, or did I imagine that? Also, don't want to put you on the spot,
Yes.
but if you've been
No,
go ahead.
it's yeah, I can talk a bit more about M2. I'm assuming I didn't miss something and I'm not responding to the wrong question.
Yep, yeah, M2 is what we're talking about. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, great. Yeah, so I think the premise for this was just looking at currently available data from Amazon, and then the TNC data report published by the Department of Public Utilities, in which it showed that the TNC vehicles are now
like the TNC vehicle trips are increasing post-pandemic, and they are contributing. The hypothesis is that they are contributing significantly to the traffic on our roadways. And that's why it becomes important to analyze them as a separate category, because they just look like cars or trucks, delivery vehicles, and TNCs. So they are not really analyzed separately in terms of how much they impact roadway congestion, by what percentage, or whether there's certain times of day when delivery vehicle and TNC traffic on the roads is high. So I think this is where the idea for this study stemmed from, of analyzing these two vehicle categories separately and seeing if they, how much significantly are they impacting traffic volumes and congestion on our roads.
Thanks, Priyanka. And I just want to clarify something. So it's focusing on TNCs like Uber and Lyft, but you mentioned like delivery vehicles and companies like FedEx, Amazon, et cetera. Would that be looked at in this study as well?
Yeah, so I think the first starting point for the delivery vehicles is first finding a good and reliable enough data source, because we don't currently have an available data set that already maps activities of delivery vehicles in terms of vehicle trips, or something similar to the TNC data set, which we now will have soon. So I think that's also the first step in the study, to try and find if there's any reliable enough data for deliveries, or if there's that gap, and then maybe the study tries to address that gap first, and then try to look more into the congestion impact side of it.
Okay, got it. Thank you. That's helpful. And then there was a note about how TNC data is now required to be shared by legislation. So would that probably be the focus, like what you'd be digging into as part of this study?
Yes, for sure, because now we have a published data set.
Okay.
That will be definitely one of the primary sources.
Got it. Thank you. Annette.
The M1 study that we had before is the one that would be looking into the TNC data set. And so that's the initial, how can we use that data to do this study? And that's why the two were linked before, but now we're covering looking into that data set with other funds. And so this would be, can we use that data? And if not, we've identified other data sets that we can use for the TNCs. And then the third component is, can we find data on the delivery vehicles? So there's different components here. Some of them we're not sure what we have, some of them we're testing out, but we know we can at least do something with TNC data.
Okay, got it. Steve Olenoff, I think you were first.
Yeah, so we sort of, it looks like we have a consensus here. So would you like me to make a motion at this point?
Len, I saw your hand up first. If anyone else has any more questions, comments.
Well, it was just to say that, I understand now more that M1 is about getting empirical data. My notion about modeling was, I thought it was really to get at the effects of the TNCs on congestion. I felt that we could model that at in various ways in order to determine the effects that they were having, if the goal was then to figure out what to do to minimize that effect. So that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Len. Tom, do you have another question?
Yep. Yes. Thanks, Chris. On the M1 and M2, I had made a note, and I think it was from the last meeting, was about coordinating with MAPC. I think MAPC was doing something similar to this, and I see you saying yes. If you could just refresh my memory on that, because it sounded like, I didn't know if this would complement something they would did or vice versa.
Go ahead, Annette.
Thank you, Chris. Yes, MAPC is looking into that same data set, and we're all kind of sharing whatever we're finding from that. So right now, neither of us have it. I think MAPC is maybe a little bit ahead of us in trying to get a hold of that data set. But it should be available to all of us, and then we'll certainly coordinate on any analyses that we're doing.
So just a quick follow-up on that. So would it make sense to see, like, if we didn't fund this year, to see where they end up with, and then see if we could then piggyback onto it next year, or I'm just trying to get a feel for. Again, we only have $150,000. It's and all these are really good ones. So just trying to figure out what we can get for the amount of money we have.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of. Oh, Annette, go ahead, please.
It's okay. I can't speak to exactly what MAPC plans to do with that data set. Julia's on the call, maybe she can. But we do feel that we can get that data set and work with it and be prepared to do this study this year, this coming year.
You're talking about the TNC study, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, Allison Felix on our staff has really been diving in on this for quite some time, and regardless of this is going to be a big focus for her and for us, and whatever happens with this study, we'll be working in tandem. And same with the parking study, but not quite the same volume of data.
Got it. Thanks for that.
Data rather.
Okay, understood. Yeah, Tom, to sort of echo what you said, maybe it would be good to see how things shake out over the next year, and then potentially revisit this topic. We could further refine a scope to consider for the following EPWB. The only remaining hand is Steve Olenoff, and I think he wants to make a motion.
Yeah, so
Steve,
given
let's hear
everything
what you have
that's
to
been
say.
said, yeah, so I move that we choose A1, E1, and P9, each at $50,000.
Okay, so we'd be moving forward a scenario 5 with A1, E1, P9. Motion has been made by Steve. Would anyone care to second that motion? Tom, Ben.
I'll second that motion, Mr. Chair.
Okay, motion having been made and
Wait,
seconded.
I'm sorry. Can you read it out again? I'm looking at the screen.
Oh, no problem.
Okay.
So the motion and
Minimize
second
it.
was for a
A1.
new scenario with discrete studies A1, E1, and P9.
Okay, A1.
Sort of a combination of 3 and 4.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, continue.
Okay. Motion having been made, excuse me, and seconded. Lauren, could you please call the roll?
Of course. Chris Clem,
Chris Clem, Mastod, yes.
David Kosis,
David Kosis, yes.
Tom Ben,
Tom Ben, yes.
Julia Wallers,
Julia Wallers, yes.
Hannah Switlikowski,
Hannah Swolikowski, yes.
Len Diggins,
Diggins, yes.
Steve Olenoff,
Steve Olenoff, yes.
okay. Jen Rowe,
Jen Rowe, yes.
and Rachel Benson. Okay.
I think she left.
Yeah, she
Okay,
did hop on.
thank you. And that motion carries.
Okay. Thanks, Lauren, and thanks everyone. It was a great conversation. I think there is one more agenda item. It's member items.
Yes.
Any members? Yep, go ahead.
Yes.
Then.
So I have a request. I wasn't sure whether to make the request here, or at the meeting this morning. But the meeting this morning was so long, so I have a question. So we have counsel, right? This board has legal counsel, through MAPC.
Megan, can you answer that?
Yes, so as our fiduciary agent, our general counsel is the same as MAPC's general counsel.
Okay. I would like for us to maybe meet or have a meeting, or maybe some information from legal counsel regarding our approach to dealing with the feds and what our options are. So maybe it's a conversation maybe for me to have, but I was thinking that maybe it might be good for this group to have it, and for that to be maybe the primary topic, so we could have back and forth with the person or persons to just understand what the source of advice that we're getting, and what the options are, and So that's it. So it's a request to me that we somehow have a meeting with our legal counsel. That's it. Thank you.
Len, I'm a little confused, but what options? I'm sorry if I missed something there. Like I guess the source of the request. Can you just elaborate a little more?
So we can comply with the feds, or we could not. Or maybe there are other options. And so I just want to kind of get a sense of yeah. Am I not clear enough still?
No, I get it now. Okay, but it was that. Yeah. I wasn't sure if you were digging into something more specific. I'll say just with the lack of clarity and the fluidity of the situation, it's only been a few months, that, I agree. I think it might be worth a conversation, and perhaps this is something that I can continue with MPO staff offline just to begin to get a sense of where we're at and when the timing of the conversation might make the most sense.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know, Tegan, if you care to have any other response out of this time, I think, I'll let you.
Yeah, I think we'd need to talk about what that looks like. So let's continue that conversation offline, Chris. Thank you for setting the stage for that.
Thanks, Tegan. Thanks, Len.
Sure. And I'm available for talking also. I'm never really sure when to bring these things up, so and I'm used to dealing in the public space, so it's like everything I'm going to say is on the record in one way or another anyway. So that's it. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Len. Steve Olenoff, do you have another item?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to continue with that because since I am both on the MPO and I'm on the executive board of the MAPC, my comment is I think both organizations are doing the right thing right now at the present time. So I think I don't think any changes at this particular time are necessary. I think they're both doing what they should be doing at this point.
Thanks for those comments, Steve. General, I saw you appear quickly and then disappear.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Looked.
Oh, nothing? I'm sorry.
Sorry. Yeah.
Okay, no worries. Want to make sure you didn't miss your chance. All right. If there are no member items, we can move on to our last topic today, which is the next meeting. I believe this is scheduled for Thursday, May 29th at 1 p.m. Meeting will take place virtually, and a calendar invite will be sent out from Olivia. So please just let her know if you won't be able to attend at that date. Julia Wallers, do you have a question?
Yeah, actually, not a question, just as far as member items, since our next meeting is not till the end of May, just wanted to give a shout out about the webinar we're doing in a few weeks about our e-cargo bike resource report webpage. We just released it a couple weeks ago, and we'll be doing a webinar with City of Boston and Mass CEC and Net Zero, which was very similar to one of the UPWP studies, I think, last year. So like a good example of how we sort of coordinated and made sure that the work didn't replicate each other and worked in tandem. So awesome. That's May 15th, I think at 11 or 1. I can drop it in the chat if I don't have access to my computer right now. But if you have municipalities or folks who are interested in this sort of niche topic, it's an interesting one to explore and just ask questions directly about how this can work and save municipalities some money and pollution and all that good stuff.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for the plug. I don't know if anyone on staff has access to a link to that webinar. You can pop it in the chat. I actually think I just found it.
It's right on
with a quick Google search. So I'll share that. And
thank you.
Yeah, if anyone could attend, that would be great.
My dog chewed my power cord for my laptop and it's dead. And so I'm limited to my phone for the next couple of hours.
I'm sorry to hear that.
I know. I have a call into IT.
At least the dog's still alive. Yeah.
He's fine. He just chewed at the wires. I'm like, why is it not charging? I plugged it in. Why is it dying? Oh, man.
All right.
Yeah. He's perfectly fine.
Excuse me. I think with that, if there's no more member items, I'll take a motion and a second to adjourn.
Yeah. So moved.
So moved.
So seconded, because we're also loopy now.
All right, I got to move in a second. I'll let staff figure that one out in the meeting.
It's Leonard second.
Thanks,
second. Yeah.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, and with that, we are adjourned.
Thanks, Chris.
Great discussion. I will see you all on May 29th.
Thank
Actually,
you.